What's up, guys? White Sox Daily back again. A new week and a little bit of news over the weekend here pertaining to the Chicago White Sox, particularly in the form of one big free agent rumor that we're now hearing connected by Ken Rosenthal, who's usually a fairly well connected insider, so that's a big one. And we'll start things off right off the bat with one of the more unconventional stories of the offseason for the Chicago White Sox, as they have gone the route of signing two undrafted free agents, which is not particularly, we just kind of mentioned it, common to the usual path for Major League Baseball generally, primarily because there's just so many rounds. Not that rare in, say, professional football, the NHL, things of that nature, for the occasional talented player to end up going undrafted. But in Major League Baseball, with the just ridiculous influx of picks, the international free agent signing period, that's usually how about 99.99% of players end up making it to the league. But the White Sox have gone and made a couple of interesting signings here. Most recently, we've had a couple of instances of some undrafted players end up making it in MLB. There's, of course, the biggest example, Larry Walker, who was an NHL player who came over. But the White Sox signing Anthony Patterson and Michael Gemma. Both of them were NAIA and JUCO pitchers that ended up making pro days for the Chicago White Sox. They came out. They ended up trying out at the North Carolina Tread Athletics facility, and both of them ended up impressing the Chicago White Sox scouts and ended up getting minor league deals. Patterson was a Central Alabama Community College pitcher, and then he ended up finishing his career at Cumberland University, which sort of somewhat might explain, why some of these guys go undrafted. You end up playing at some of these small schools. He was a 2.52 ERA pitcher and ended up helping them win the NAIA World Series in 2025. So it was, kind of a big deal at that level. So could be something worth monitoring in the low minors early on in his career. He'll begin the season in Arizona and then obviously hope to make the jump up to Single A and affiliated White Sox baseball after that. As far as Gemma, 24 years old, ended up playing at Northeastern University. So again, a small college guy. He was primarily a reliever at Northeastern. He did get 11 starts through his 4 seasons there in college, but primarily a guy who came out of the bullpen at a small college. So again, you can kind of understand how the undrafted tag ended up attaching itself to him. But yeah, he also went to the pro day, ended up with a mid-90s fastball, hitting as high as 95. And so the White Sox thought, what the heck, a lot of raw tools, a guy that not many other teams were taking a look at because he was a small school relief pitcher. So why not? They go ahead, they take a stab at him. And so 2 pitchers add their names to the Chicago White Sox minor league rosters through the undrafted free agency pool, something we might keep an eye on going forward. We kind of touched on this one before as well, but after the White Sox made their 16 international free agent signings, one of the big names was Fernando Graterol, who recently ended up in MLB's top 50 international free agent rankings as the top catching prospect in the international free agent pool. 17 years old. The White Sox ended up signing him for $1.6 million, which was the most of any international free agent signing for the White Sox in this period. He's a guy that brings a lot of potential and raw talent to the very loaded Chicago White Sox backstop pool through their minor league system right now. Of course, we've already got Teal and Cuero up on the major league roster. You've got Corey Lee as well that can rotate in up there. And now yet another guy that potentially makes one of those guys may be available in a trade. But at just 17 years old, you're talking about a guy that even still has 7 to 8 years on most of those other players to develop. And, you talk about guy that's the catcher of the future. When Corey Lee is going to be in his mid-30s, or when, Cuero ends up being 31, 32, Gretterall is going to be 23, 24, and then he'll be ready to make his major league jump. So you're really varying the age gap there nicely, despite having three talented, currently young catchers, to get a 17-year-old with unbelievable offensive power like Gretterall is. It kind of gives you two separate clocks towards the future of the Chicago White Sox at that position. And MLB certainly recognizing it, calling him the top prospect at that position in the international free agent pool. He's also a guy that was registered with one of the top bat speeds of any of the players in this international free agent signing. And again, only a 17-year-old, not a guy who's played a little bit of college ball, not a guy that's, in his early 20s. One of the top 5 bat speeds recorded amongst this class, which is fairly ridiculous, and a guy that has a fairly strong arm as well. So a guy with just all kinds of tools. The most impressive, of course, is offensively. He's 6'1", 175 as a high school-aged kid, who's certainly going to grow into his frame a little bit more as well, who already possesses insane power. The potential is through the roof. Certainly a name to watch for the Chicago White Sox for years to come. Another name that White Sox fans will be paying attention to, we kind of mentioned him earlier on in the offseason as a potential guy that the White Sox could have their eye on. We now have confirmation from Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic that the Chicago White Sox are deeply interested in Michael Conforto. Was most recently with the Los Angeles Dodgers last year. 33 years old, a guy that you can certainly just put right out there in right field, solves that issue for a year. That's kind of why we had already been talking about him. A former All-Star as well. Had a really solid stint recently with the San Francisco Giants. Had a really, really good career prior to that, particularly with the Mets. And then last year had a massive dip, which would make his potential price this season a lot lower than it would have been in previous years, which might be what's enticing the White Sox to give him a bit of a harder look. Hit just 199 last season. Obviously, with a lower batting average, his home run numbers were down as well, but he's a guy that still had a number of hits, registering with unbelievable exit velocity. A guy that was still hitting over 100 mile per hour exit velocity fairly routinely when he was making contact. Someone that certainly gives you a potential for a bounce back year and some power from your outfield bats. And especially if you're able to keep Luis Robert. I'm going to mention that every single time we talk about the outfield, because if you solve your right field issue by bringing in a veteran that can sit out there and then immediately trade Luis Robert, you're right back in the exact same hole. Doesn't make a great deal of sense. Keep Luis Robert, make a signing like this. Conforto goes right out there, stick him in right field 1 year, maybe 2 years at the most, and you're comfortable with that. Perfectly acceptable. I would like it if they continued to pursue that. If you can make the numbers work, if you can get his interest aligned with yours, I think that's a really good addition for the Chicago White Sox in the position that they're in for 2026. And then we'll end things off with a bit of unfortunate news here, as Chicago White Sox legend Wilbur Wood did die over the weekend. So, condolences to the Wood family. He was 84 years old. A guy that pitched 12 seasons for the Chicago White Sox, ended up setting an MLB record at one point in 1972 for the most innings thrown by a pitcher in a single season, when he threw 376 and 2/3 innings. That was just across 49 starts as well. So a guy that was very famous as one of the best knuckleballers in baseball across the 1970s. He will be missed, and a White Sox legend lost from us over the weekend. And again, we send prayers and thoughts to his family and to the White Sox fandom at large as well, especially those who would have been alive at the time and grew up watching him pitch for the Southsiders. That'll do it, though, for this week's first episode of White Sox Daily. I have been Aaron Feely. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.